So it's week 3 of Next, all about infrastructure and security. And I'd just love to talk to you, Pete, around kind of what are you seeing as the biggest security threats? What are concerning people most? And what do you think are the biggest solutions that are available to guide people through this surface area at the moment?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think, that security and risk seems to be the biggest roadblock whenever you have that cloud, that cloud conversation. It's the biggest, well, perceived risk, I think is probably the word that I would use, because I think sometimes it is perception. I guess there's that concern that I'm in the cloud, which means it's kind of open for everyone, kind of everyone to get access to. That's just not the case, right? I mean, you can't run a cloud business if you can't prove out the levels of security that you have within your business to protect customer data, and that's second to none. It's probably, from a Google Cloud perspective, the thing that we invest in the most, right, to make sure that we're rock solid when it comes to what we do from a security perspective. Whether it's encrypting data, whether it's how we're actually protecting the data centers themselves, it goes without saying that has to be number one on the list of things that you do, because you're being entrusted with people's, with people's information, and that is business critical to them, and ultimately business critical to us. So it's absolutely a thing that Google takes ridiculously seriously at the end of the day, because we can't, we wouldn't have a business if there were, if that was something that we didn't take that seriously. However, it's still the thing that you hear the most about, right, when you're speaking to customers is, yeah, cloud, does that mean there's challenges, who can access my data, or all those types of things. So kind of it is frustrating because it absolutely isn't a challenge, but you can also see it from the other side where there is that perceived risk. But it's a great conversation to have, because it gives you the opportunity then, right, to talk about all the things that you're doing, the investment that's being made. And you're never gonna get involved in a cloud conversation if you don't handle the security thing, if you don't handle the information security needs of every company. So it's always going to come up in a conversation.
Absolutely. And again, I think you touch on that point really around education and awareness. So when it comes to security, it's not something specific to cloud. It affects every aspect of our business, or our personal lives and setups as well.
Yeah.
And in March, so height of the pandemic, I saw a statistic saying I think it was 300% increase in global cybersecurity threats. But when you drill down into what they were, the vast majority was nothing to do with cloud computing at all. A lot of them were like email phishing, for example, and also things about that pragmatic things people do. All of us are guilty of it to some extent. Of you take a slight risk from Wi-Fi or something like that, or encrypted USBs, that kind of thing. There's so many other areas that contribute to threats. So it's making that awareness and showing how you can have control. So education, awareness about what is being done, how you can protect yourself, I think is absolutely vital.
It's really funny because it reminds me. So in my previous life, when I used to work for a company where I was looking after their reporting infrastructure, and I always remember, when there was a problem, the reporting tool would always be the tool that got blamed, right? Yeah, the reporting tool's not available, and it'd be like, you do realize that there are so many more component parts that make up this solution, right? You've got the underlying database, you've got the network, you've got all of these things. It's the easy thing to blame, right? It's the thing that people see, so that's the problem. But you're so right that there are so many other things and so many other things happening that contribute to those risks. But it always has to be an open and transparent conversation, because if you don't get through the infosecurity team of an organization, then you're kind of nowhere anyway. So you have to deal with it, and the good thing from a Google perspective is that we're confident in what we put in place, to minimize, or even take away the risks that we see every day.
Absolutely. And I think one final point for me on that is the cultural aspect as well. And the whole really mantra about, security is a shared responsibility at the end of the day. Is every role, every person in the organization, and making sure that's embedded in everything you do. And for me, that's the other key point. Like most things really with technology, it's culture, values, and technology all combined. It's that holistic view that really helps to make things happen and keep us all safe and secure.
Yeah, and it's finding that right balance because I've been in organisations where you can't print things and you can't do those kinds of things because they want to make sure that there is zero risk, right? And by taking away all of those risk factors, you used the point about USBs and all those types of things, and I think that's not the place where we all want to be, right? Because we all want to be able to have the freedom to be able to do what we need to do in order to be able to do the job that we're paid to do. So it's absolutely finding that happy middle ground. And you think you're absolutely right. Most of that is on us, right? It's on us as individuals to make sure that we're doing our bit. Because at the end of the day, technology is technology, and it will develop and it will change, and we'll get advances in that technology. But the biggest risk, as with most things, right, is the part that we play in that. And so yeah, I just couldn't agree more.
Fantastic. And maybe looking ahead at infrastructure change more generally, but what are you seeing as the biggest drivers for changes there?
One of the things that I'm always keen to do when I'm having a conversation with customers about cloud and the impact that cloud can have is, I guess, to take it above just an infrastructure conversation, right? To understand business change and business opportunity and try and bring all of those things together and really see infrastructure as the foundational element to making those changes. However, it clearly is still a really important part of it, right? Because without the infrastructure, then we really can't do anything. So I think from my perspective, it's how do you advance that infrastructure to meet those changing needs of organizations? How do you meet that agility need, right? How can you get things quicker? How can you take different solutions that customers are running and make sure that they can be made available in the cloud as well, right? It's all good and to take the new technologies, but there are lots of organizations out there that run, let's use the word legacy, right? Legacy applications. And if there's a way that we can, to do something with those legacy applications as well, so they can benefit from the cloud as well, I think how we look at providing infrastructure to do that is a really important, focus. Now, clearly, you want people to move away from the legacy solutions and to move to new technologies, but that's not always possible. So I think there's making those, changes. I think it's making sure that we can extend what's available to people as well. We're seeing lots of demand from different parts of the world now, and we need to make sure that we can meet that, meet that demand. And that's a core part of everything that Google does, right? To make sure that they're constantly investing to make sure that we're providing the same level of performance and the same level of capability, no matter where you are, no matter in where you are in the world. And we've talked about security, right? I think again, that's an important part of every investment we make into our infrastructure, right? To make sure that security is embedded at every part of that infrastructure. No matter whether it's the data center itself, it's the network, it's what we do with the data when we can encrypt it. So I think that is a really, really important, part as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think what you said really about, data-led analytics, responsiveness, greater collaboration we touched on earlier as well. I think they're all key drivers. And maybe one other thing that springs to mind as well is, you talked a lot about partnership there, which is so important, and helping organizations through this process and having that trusted relationship, absolutely vital. And maybe also the finance aspect of that as well, helping organizations have that confidence and be able to incrementally adjust and develop, according to their particular context. I think that flexibility as well can really help a great deal.
One of my roles at Google is around partnerships, more on the kind of delivery side, I guess, on the SI side, but we also know that partnerships with everyone, right, is really important to everything that we do, because although we want to be able to do as much as Google ourselves, right, because that's important. We also know that there are partners and there are organizations out there that have spent a considerable amount of time developing solutions that we can absolutely take advantage of at the benefit of our customers. And we also know that customers don't necessarily always want to change things, right? If they've invested again in other technologies. So partners, I think, is a really, really important, really important part. And we're very open to partnerships. I think we want to grow our partner ecosystem, and whether it's around technology partners, partners that have developed new solutions that we can absolutely embed into our platform, or whether it's about fundamentally delivering the infrastructure and the solutions, they all play an integral part into the service that that we provide to our clients, right? Because without all of those aspects, the infrastructure and some of the things that we do is just sometimes just a small part of that. So I think that partnership one is a really good point, and very valid one.
Thank you. And I think maybe one final question then, maybe think of challenges and blockers for a second. So in terms of organisation moving their workloads to the cloud, what are you finding are those challenges, and how are you helping solve them?
Yeah, so I think we talked about it previously. There's that perceived risk, right? Is that what does this really mean for me? And actually, am I putting my business as usual at risk by moving to the cloud? And again, I specifically use the word perceived risk because, there are always risks with everything you do, right? When you change things, there's always a risk to something. But again, what we do as a company and the foundational elements that we put in place, and again, the partners that we've just talked about, we combine those things together to de-risk what we're doing as much as possible, right? And I think that message is starting to resonate with customers that we're speaking to. And again, with some of those service delivery partners that we work with, right, they then bring aspects of their experience of moving people to the cloud. Because typically the first thing that you get asked is, where have you done this before, right? Where have you done it before? I don't want to be the first person that's moved my workload to the cloud. So referenceability is something that's really important to us, and making sure that we have those strong stories, those strong use cases to where we see, where customers have benefited from doing these things. Because even if there is perceived risk, it's that balance against benefit, right? It's that cost benefit analysis that I think lots of organizations want to do. Minimize the risk, but if I can minimize that risk by almost driving benefit as well, and how do I change what my business is doing, and maybe not just affecting bottom line cost, but maybe driving the top line as well by being able to, I guess, change my business. I think that's the conversation that we can definitely have. Security, we talked about that, right? That's always a concern. I think one of the really interesting things that often gets raised is skills, is that education piece. Right, I'm doing this. What do I do differently? What skills and capability do I need in order to be able to maximize what I'm doing? And it's always an interesting conversation because clearly there is a skills need. You need to be able to understand how some of these core technologies work to benefit from it. But in a lot of instances, what you're really doing is just moving workloads, right? You're not fundamentally changing those workloads. You're just changing them, moving them to a new place. So actually, it doesn't really change the core skills that you need. All it really does is give you the opportunity to learn some, to learn some new skills. And I think that's, everyone wants to be able to learn new things. For me, the challenge then becomes, how do we deliver those new skills, right? How do we make that as quick and as consumable as possible, right? One of the things I always talk about when it comes to education and training, because we've all been there, is you go on that training course because you think that's the thing I need to learn. You don't use it, and 6 months later you've totally forgotten it, right? And I think that's always the problem with more traditional learning. What we need to be able to enable is learning now, right? And what the one thing I would love to kind of see in this kind of education world is, I guess, context aware education. Teach me the bit I need to know at the point I need to know it, not 6 months before or 6 months after. So yeah, skills, education, enablement. I think they're one of the other things that we often see. So, But I think they're all addressable, right? All of those roadblocks and those challenges we hear, I think there are things in order to be able to, to address those things. So it always makes for an interesting conversation.
Totally agree. I think three things sprung to mind as you were talking there: the personalized learning experience and through experience itself. Couldn't agree more. And also helping people know how best to learn, kind of smart learning. Everything around meta condition, for example, I think that's really, really acutely important. And also things like the team behind that cloud management, making you sure you've got that depth of input into that. So having DevOps and engineering as part of that conversation as well. For everything I've looked at in terms of case studies, that's been super, super effective. And the tangible examples you talked about there, showing the success you can have, reducing cloud waste, etc. Really, really important.
So picking up on a couple of things that you've mentioned there, that kind of management of the infrastructure is really important, right? Because how do you simplify that? And it's actually one of the things that I guess is kind of core to conversations at the moment. Again, in the pandemic that we're in, how if I move to the cloud, does that make sure that business continuity challenge that I potentially got is removed or minimized? So how much can you automate the management of that infrastructure, and that's a really important thing that not only Google work on, but again, to go back to the partners, right? We have partners that are working on technologies that are using AI and things like that to understand situations and be able to adapt to those situations and learn from those situations. So I think you're absolutely spot on. That is something that we're doing a lot with, but I think there is definite opportunity to do a lot more in that space to kind of take out that perceived risk of moving to the cloud, and what does that mean from a kind of business continuity perspective.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Pete. It's a pleasure as always to talk to you. And I think that brings to a wrap really our discussion for week 3 around infrastructure and security, and a very positive trajectory ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you again, Sally. Good to speak to you.
Too.